Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans and one chaos coordinator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we are going to let our guests introduce themselves to you, dear listener, dear viewer at home. So we're going to start with the outlaw author himself, Mr. Jesse James Fain. How many banks have you robbed today?
None today, but there's some hours left. I don't know. We'll see how long this podcast takes. Hi everybody, I'm Jesse James Fain. I do go by the outlaw author for the easy branding. I write science fiction, fantasy, urban fantasy, pretty much anything I can squeeze a gunfight, a fist fight, or a sword fight into. I'm a huge fan of what I call martial tales, which is pretty much anything that revolves around a fight like that, and themes of revenge and warriors issues, things like that.
Okay. Just remember, because you like to write about revenge, if you're actually going to do it, don't put it in a book. And if you put it in a book, don't do it. They caught some female mystery writer murdering her husband the same way she'd done in a book. It was just her luck that the cop investigating it had read that book. So just be careful. You don't document your own crimes. Just going to throw that out.
Oh, no. That's why everything's in space.
If you shoot some guy with a silencer in Midtown Manhattan, make sure you test it at the range first so it doesn't jam.
Yeah, so you don't have to keep racking the slide.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Amateur hour. I mean, he was cold as ice when he did it. So if you know, you know. All right. Next, we have Mr. J.R. Wise, the other J.R.
Hi, I'm the lesser JR, as I introduced myself from the last time I was on this show. I think JR Handley and I both decided we're both the lesser JR, and J.R.R. Tolkien was the greater JR.
It's because he has another R.
Yeah, that's true. What it is. So, like, when we get up there, we can add an R to our name.
Ooh, like at what point do we get to add the extra R? Like,
you have to get permission from the head.
Books, probably.
Yeah, you gotta get permission from the head of the order. So,
well, you know, they had
join a pirate crew.
They had the great Josh fight where like a bunch of people named Josh ended up having a fight to see like the last man standing got to keep the name. And so maybe we should do like a JR fight. We should like meet some, I don't know, Central Michigan, somewhere no one likes. And we could just have the great, like all the JRs will meet. But you know, because the military thing, we'll just drink and the last man sober wins. That's how we'll do it.
I could go on a long time.
That's if any of you show up sober.
Yeah.
That's also a
fair point.
Up in the air. All right. So besides being the lesser JR as you introduce yourself, can you tell us a little bit more for people that haven't caught those episodes?
Yeah. So I'm a former Marine and soldier. Grass wasn't greener on the other side. Who knew? I just got into writing as it was actually an assignment from my counselor who I was working with all my PTSD stuff on. She told me to go write science fiction about stuff that happened in Afghanistan because it was a way to think about it without thinking about it. I published a book. A guy named J.F. Holmes took notice of me, and now I'm writing for him.
Oh, freaking standing. He's a pretty talented guy himself. All right, next we got Mr. Michael LaVoice.
Hey, hi, Michael LaVoice here, author of Galaxy's Most Wanted. Soon to have a new series coming out, hopefully starting in January, called Gladius League. I write space opera with militaristic overtones and undertones, and sometimes even underpinnings.
But if you write the Galaxy's Most Wanted about criminals, does that mean you're related to Jesse? Are you also an outlaw author?
Jesse was my inspiration.
Okay.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah. So, also working on a Space Navy, Space Coastie series with New Zealand's own Peter Stanley, the disrespecter of time zones everywhere. And I was getting messages from him at work today. You busy? You busy? I'm at work, man. Leave me alone.
He's nice, but he does call you at weird hours. Like it was like 4 a.m. He was calling me to ask me for help on a scene. I'm like, dude, time zones, my dude. Time zones,
man. But you got to respect the time zones, dude. Plus, he lives in the future, and he looks upon us in our quaint ways of the past with amusement. So
this is true.
So that's
He has done something we have not. He's gotten to visit Hobbit Town.
It's true. He's there.
You ever visited Hobbiton?
Lives in it.
Pretty much. I mean, they've got nothing else to do in New Zealand, right? They do that and they wrestle what? Trees or something? I don't know.
Sheep.
Sheep.
They don't know how many sheep they have. The guy they hire to count them keeps falling asleep.
That's what they have to do in New Zealand. They do sheep.
All right, well, we're going to keep this family friendly, so I'm going to ask you, Mr. Rick Partlow, to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home.
I'm Rick Partlow. I write military science fiction and space opera. Just finished my 77th novel yesterday.
Wow.
Do you ever sleep?
Not as much as I'd like.
I want to be you when I grow up. Holy crap. That's insane. How long have you been writing?
I haven't decided who I want to be when I grow up yet.
There's still time.
Right now, it looks like you're shirting for Ernie from My Three Sons. But that's just...
Rick, how long have you been writing? How long did it take you to get those 77?
Well, in 2011, I had 2 books written.
Okay. So
in 2016, I had 7 books written. So I've written 70 books in the last 7 years.
Yeah.
I need to learn your secrets.
Caffeine and ibuprofen.
Well, it's like you're in the infantry all over again. All right. Next, we have Mr. Shane Gries. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers at home?
Yeah, hi. I'm Shane. I just retired from the Army. Did 30 years active duty in the infantry. At some point along the way, my wife said, dude, you need a hobby. So I started writing a few years ago. And I've been writing military science fiction and zombie apocalypse novels. I've got 7 out, and I'm working on a space mercenary novel right now as we speak, which would be novel number 8.
Any truth to the rumor that you got drunk and you wrestled a kangaroo while you were stationed in Australia?
Oh, let's not put too much out there. I did a lot.
I wasn't sure. I can't remember what I signed the NDAs for.
I'm sure the first half of that is true.
There may have been kangaroos in the story somewhere.
All right, so
they don't have enough sheep. They don't have enough
sheep.
They don't have enough sheep in Australia, so
Anyway.
So the next part of the introduction to your listeners, how we first met, but all of us actually served in Falkenberg's Legion together. We decided it was a little too hairy, so we got out. Jerry was very disappointed, but what are you going to do? And with that out of the way, since we normally do our religion questions, but these guests have been here so much, I just don't want to get random weirdness out there just to have them pick something. I'm going to instead ask you on the spot, no time to prep. If you're going to name your own space mercenary company, what are you going to name it? We're going to start with you, Rick.
Wholesale Slaughter.
You cheated because you've already written the series.
I've read that series. I love that series. That was so much fun.
Why would I try to improve my perfection, JR?
How did you come up with the name for that when you were writing it?
Well, I had a friend whose last name was Slaughter.
Sergeant Slaughter?
He was a sergeant in the National Guard at one point.
No way.
He got out as Captain Slaughter, but he was thinking about opening up a gun shop way back when, and I told him if he did, he should name it Wholesale Slaughter. And he never did open the gun shop up, so I wound up naming a book after instead.
That's one way to do it. All right. Next, we got Mr. Jesse James Fain. How are you going to name your space mercenary company?
My dissertation for my degree actually heavily involved PMCs. I was kind of writing about the future of political conflict and warfare with non-state actors and how you could handle that. And anyway, so I got to study a lot of private military companies, and it's the way you have a favorite villain. I always loved executive outcomes, so I think executive engagements would be my PMC company.
I dig it. I get behind that. Executive engagements. It sounds all classy and dignified, but also maybe more. All right, Shane.
Sounds like a wedding planner.
I think I would name my space, private military contractor, Syzygy Enterprises, nicknamed the Death Dealers. So that's what I would roll with.
I can say Death Dealers. That first one, you messing me up. I was a grunt, right?
So Syzygy is where you have 3 celestial bodies lined up. It's a weird term, but it is a real word. Look it up.
So it's triple canopy. Okay.
Triple canopy. There you
go. Okay. All right. What about you, JR?
I didn't even think about that. That's good.
I would name it Green Weenie Solutions when you need your enemy screwed over as hard as possible.
Nice.
I appreciate that. Green Weenie Solutions. All right, LaVoice.
Oh, man, I'm going to go with the same mercenary unit I've been in since I started playing Mech Warrior. That's Team Bonsai.
Okay. How did you come up with that one?
They were already there. In the old Mech Warrior compendium back in the day before they changed it, there was a reference to a Dr. B. Bonsai and his Hong Kong Cavaliers and Team Bonsai. They were a mercenary unit in the Inner Sphere. And so when Mech Warrior 4 Mercenaries came out, a bunch of guys got together and Team Bonsai. And so that's the unit that I joined playing Mech Warrior Leagues on a server based out of Florida. We had a hell of a lot of fun with that. It was great.
That was the best game ever.
Oh, I love that game so much. I missed it. I missed hanging out with George Ledoux, the voice of Duncan Fisher. He used to do radio spots with us. We had a Mech Warrior League's radio setup where you could call play-by-play of the game like they did in the actual video game. And George Ledoux agreed to come in and play Duncan Fisher for free and just record sounders for Mech Warrior League's radio. And so it was fantastic. It was so much fun.
Okay. I'm going for Blue Falcon Enterprises for mine. It's just low-hanging fruit, I gotta take it. So, all right, Rick. So, what have you been drinking to keep yourself caffeinated this winter season?
It's always the same thing: Diet Coke.
You don't mix it up at all.
No, I don't like really. I can live with Diet Mountain Dew, but it's hard to find out here. So,
really,
why is that hard to find?
So the grocery store, they don't have it. I can tell you.
Well, that's crappy. You can do better. You just need to tell them. All right, Jesse, what about yourself? When you're not robbing banks, what are you drinking?
Cherry Coke Zero. If we're going to do the soda is an acceptable answer. That and hot chocolate. I've probably said it way too many times on this show. I'm a big hot chocolate fan. So
marshmallows or no marshmallows?
I gotta have marshmallows. The little ones, the little mini ones, not like the big ones because they never melt.
Okay. All right. Well, it's a priority. You got to have the right kind of marshmallows. So we do what you can. All right, Shane, what are you drinking this cold winter season?
Black coffee and Jameson. It's the standard.
Together or separately?
Together. Or Jameson on its own. That's fine too.
We got to have standards. That's why you were the officer. You were setting standards.
That's right. I was drinking single malt scotch when I was on active duty, but now I've, come a little down to earth, a little more Jameson in my diet.
Appreciate it. What about you, JR?
I've been drinking a lot of hot chocolate with peppermint schnapps in it.
You could have just left it at I've been drinking a lot, but no, you kept going.
No.
He's getting ready for that throwdown for the JR.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to get my tolerance up, man. It's not like it was on active duty.
Yeah, I don't know that mine is there either, but I also care about my liver now, so I might need it someday, right?
Dude, milk thistle. Take milk thistle supplements, and then you don't have to worry about your liver anymore. You're good.
Scribbling that down on the notes. Doc, I can drink twice as much. Why? The colonel said just take milk thistle.
That's right. 1,000 milligrams daily. You're good.
It regenerates anyway. The liver regenerates. You'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I'm taking all of this as valid medical advice.
He's a colonel and stayed at a Best Western, or was it Holiday Inn Express?
That's right. I stayed there last night.
There you go.
All right. What about you, LaVoice?
Oh man, it's always black coffee for me, buddy. Dark and strong black coffee.
He likes his coffee like he likes his men.
That's right.
We don't judge, Michael. We don't judge. So I've been doing the black coffee mostly because of the calories, because the holiday season, it's kind of hard to keep yourself on track. But at the rate I'm going, I will fit back into my Class A's next Christmas. So, or this coming Christmas, I guess, for 2025, since we're listening. Not that I'd have a reason to put it on, but just nice to know that I could. So, I mean, like,
goals, man.
I don't even know where my Class A's are.
Mine are in a closet somewhere. I still have my duffel bag for my rack under the stairs. Although they've changed uniforms like 4 times since I got out. So
I was shocked when I went. My son graduated from AIT, and all of a sudden everybody's in these brown jackets. I'm like, what the hell is this? Did I just step through a portal back to the 1940s? What happened? It was crazy.
I still have my BD one set of BDUs from when I was in. They'll never fit again though.
Is it the woodland camo? Like I was in '89.
Yeah, woodland camo.
We call that God's camis, because that's what it was.
I tell you all how many dress uniforms, battle dress uniforms, and PT uniforms I got in my closets.
But do you have the
one of every version since 1980, right?
You still have the reflective belt, sir.
I remember when they still had the suspenders as opposed to like the webbing and the vests and stuff for the battle gear.
You mean the LBE?
Yeah,
LBE, baby. Load bearing equipment.
Yeah, I still have my LBE from way back when.
You made me turn mine in.
You still have your brown sweater that you wore underneath the BDU jacket.
I used to.
I have my whoopee.
I was in Hawaii. I never got the brown sweater.
Somebody stole my whoopee. I was very angry.
Mine too. It has a combat loss. Somehow it just fell off the back of the truck. We still don't know what happened to it. I am sure one of the indigent locals is using it. It's not in my closet. Absolutely. That is the one good thing about out processing from a combat zone. You could get away with a lot of combat losses. I'm just saying, hypothetically. They don't need everything back. Although that's one of the things I've heard it as a joke, and one of these days I'm actually going to do it. End a military sci-fi story with them having to clear CIF, because then you can start
I'm working on I'm plotting another series that's based on some short stories that I've published with Henchman Press, primarily from the Tales of the E4 Mafia antho, and it's about a space defense artillery unit, and I'm definitely going to have a CIF out processing scene for one of these guys in the novels.
Well, I never ended a military science fiction book with that, but I have mentioned and had them doing PMCS many times on their powered armor. I figured we did a lot of it.
This is what I'm excited about tonight's show.
Anybody seen the movie A Midnight Clear? I mean, it's Christmas season, and that movie is
I haven't seen it.
Appropriate. So it came out like 30 years ago, World War II film, Battle of the Bulge. It's about a intelligence reconnaissance platoon. They're put out there, and there's Germans and whatever. War happens, and they end up losing a bunch of their equipment. And the ending scene of the movie is when the colonel is handing the surviving corporal a statement of charges for the missing Jeep and radios that they had to abandon to the Germans.
Nice.
It's amazing.
That actually happened. I have never verified it, but the rumor was some of the people when we abandoned Afghanistan got statement of charges for equipment they were told to leave.
I heard that too.
You garnish somebody's wages for $84 billion worth of equipment. Just asking.
Yeah.
Well, they spread it out. It's not just one guy.
So the Marines have a perfect solution to missing equipment, though. They just find it elsewhere. Gear adrift is a gift. Am I right, JR?
That's right. No, there's only one thief in the Marine Corps. Everybody else is just trying to get their shit back.
My squad leader was a former Marine. He actually left embassy duty, went to the Guard because they told him he wouldn't deploy. 3 weeks to the day after he enlisted in the Guard and left the Corps, we were in Iraq.
Nice.
But he taught us that. So when we were on one of the Marine bases in Iraq and they liberated our combat, we kept our tow bar combat mounted and they liberated it from us because they just wanted one. So we took their guide on and we did a trade back. I imagine the corporal asleep on guard duty when we took their guide on because we weren't even quiet about it. I imagine his life was not very comfortable for a while.
Oh, God, no. Marines are just absolute menaces when they go back to army bases, though, in Afghanistan. We would rob if we went to blind. We would just like break into the chow hall in the middle of the night and just steal crates of food because we were just in some shitty little patrol base out in the middle of nowhere near the Pakistani border.
I mean, we did that to our own, too. I actually liberated some mechanic units, 50-gallon drum that they turned into a grill, and we used their own cutting irons, and we basically turned it into armor for our Humvee. So we welded it ourselves. They didn't need it. They could eat
creative procurement, man. Creative procurement.
We did have standards, though, Shane, just so you know. Like, we had standards. We would never steal from the combat units, only the people that didn't leave the base, because we were trying to be gentlemen.
That's fair. That's fair.
I mean,
stealing from ramps doesn't even count.
That's just taking the equipment they're not going to use.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
That's just considered a reissue, isn't it?
All right. So
appropriation.
I'm going to take it. We're going to write it all down. But all right. So the topic today is private military contractors or PMCs in space. Michael, you got to do it for us. In space.
In space.
There we go. You did it the last time we had an in space topic. But so first off, what qualifies as a private military contractor? Because we got to define our terms. First time in all of these episodes.
It doesn't matter what we're going to say. You're just going to read some crap you found on Wikipedia anyway. Why don't you start?
I haven't actually looked because I just figured any military unit for hire would count, and that was acceptable definition. I just wanted you to be creative, Michael. Jeez.
I think PMC comes with a patina of respectability.
Wait. This is PMCs? This isn't PMCS in space? I'm on the wrong show.
Yeah, where's your -10 manual?
PM Magazine as a hologram.
The great thing about PMCSing, though, is with malicious compliance, if you want to go on a mission, you can always find a way to justify getting out of it. Like, ooh,
yes, you can.
I would like to go, sir, but this vehicle is just not up to standard.
I just deadlined this whole vehicle because I broke a bolt off on the fuel tank. I'm so sorry.
As a former commander, there is a magical solution to that. It's called the Circle X.
So we had a first sergeant that was trying to make sergeant major on the backs of all of us. And so he volunteered us for mission after mission. It got bad enough that the sergeant major of not our battalion, not our brigade, but the entire 101st came into country to have a conversation with this first sergeant. And so when we had finally had enough and I realized we were all falling asleep on the road because we were so exhausted, we did it away from base. So there was no officer to actually sign that. So that was we were smart thinking with our malicious compliance. Although I will say, and I don't know if you had this when you were in, Rick, but the Blue Force tracker, the electronical change. Yeah, that just everything because you don't get away from command. Like they can micromanage from the rear, and that's not always a good thing. So you have to break those too. I mean,
we just had a full bird colonel hiding out behind trees during training exercises. He didn't need a Blue Force tracker.
Was he at least like trying to be stealthy, or was he just leaning against a tree smoking a cigar?
No, he was trying to catch people doing stuff so he could yell at them.
Did you ever do that, Shane?
Oh, not that, but so here's a war story, not from a war. When I was a basic training battalion commander, I had this policy that if anybody could catch me infiltrating their perimeter, I would throw the whole company a pizza party. And I never had to buy a single pizza in 2 years. And I would infiltrate every perimeter and every field training exercise. I wouldn't even make it that hard. If you did it at 3:00 in the morning, it'd be like cheating, right? It'd be like kicking puppies. No, I'd do it in the middle of the day. And I'd walk into, the company command posts and like, y'all are dead, and I'd have first sergeants flipping tables over. They're so pissed off at their privates that nobody's pulling security because the colonel would just like a ghost get through their perimeter. I had a private come out. I was low crawling in, I'm camoed up, and he comes out of the perimeter by himself and starts pissing and almost urinates on top of me, right? It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Would that, if he had managed to hit you, would that have counted as keeping you from?
No. It would have been fine. It would have been totally forgivable. So he buttons back up, turns around and go walk back, and then I get up and I follow him back into the perimeter, and that's how I got in the perimeter one day. And it's so much fun. Greatest job I ever had.
Sure, you pissed him off.
What you did there, Rick. All right. So
back to the definition. So private military contractors, by definition, are private companies that hire themselves out as either soldiers or pilots or what have you of military equipment and weapons to fulfill missions that perhaps the government doesn't want itself associated with. Or in the case of the MechWarrior universe, all the mercenary companies were supplemental to whatever successor state military existed.
Okay. We can all agree with that, I hope. Yes?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Appreciate your enthusiasm, JR. You're on track to join us. So what is it you think that makes the concept something that people enjoy reading so much? Because, I grew up a military brat from a long line of them. So for us, mercenaries was kind of like a bad word. Like you're, soldier for hire, soldier of fortune, instead of serving for love of country or whatever. But in science fiction, they seem to be something people enjoy, gravitate towards, and it's not considered a shameful thing.
When I was a kid, mercenaries had a kind of a, I don't know, romantic, adventure style air to them. I mean, this is back when the U.S. wasn't fighting anybody head to head because we were still under the whole dark cloud of being in Vietnam, and everything we got into, there'd be somebody yelling, "It's going to be another Vietnam." El Salvador was going to be another Vietnam. And so mercenaries were the only people who were doing any actual fighting against the commies. So we all.
And then you had
Soldier Fortune magazine.
Yeah, exactly where I was going to say, Shane.
Absolutely.
In the 80s, I got every copy of Soldier of Fortune magazine.
Yeah.
All that, these old stories, these guys running around in Africa, Rhodesia, Angola, all that stuff. I could not get enough of it.
Be a man among men.
Right.
and then you had like the men's adventure book, like Crap.
Yeah.
And Mac
the mercenary.
Bolan. Now, Mac Bolan wasn't a mercenary, but
there was
the
mercenary by Axel Kilgore.
I think that was the name.
Yeah. That was his pen name for Jerry Ahern.
Jerry Ahern's pen name, yeah. And then there's just all kinds of great series. With the Black Berets, that was another one.
I can't remember that one.
Yeah, the A-team, they were technically mercenaries.
Who?
Yeah.
The A-team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Fire 1,000 rounds an episode. Nobody ever got shot except for Mr. T once off camera.
That's because they were Vietnam veterans, and they were going by the tactics at the time was where you lay down suppressive fire and call for air support and artillery. They just didn't have any air support or artillery, so all they knew how to do was lay down suppressive fire and not hit anything.
Right.
Spray and pray, buddy. Spray and pray.
I'll buy that.
I mean, that actually does kind of work. But they did have a cool van that everyone wanted to get. So, I mean, there's that.
They did.
With a sign that said free candy on it.
And then they had the crazy guy, because it seemed in the 80s everyone had to have at least one crazy guy on the team.
Mad Dog Murdoch.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, B.A. Baracus was my hero back in the day. For sure.
Any particular reason?
I don't know. He's just cool. I mean, he was, he's good. This guy could improvise anything, right? You drop B. He was MacGyver before MacGyver was cool, right? Except not only was he MacGyver's predecessor, he was a Green Beret. God dang it! And he was super cool. A great character.
Yeah, they were hiding out in the L.A. Underground. What's the L.A. Underground?
I always thought that was a club scene.
Is that like the underworld? I mean, what is that?
That's where
I think it was the punk rock scene in the 80s, wasn't it?
It might have been.
Okay.
Where all the lizard people hang out.
Oh, okay.
So that is the the stuff, I guess, from the 80s and the 90s. When you look at the science fiction, do you think we portray PMCs the same way now in fiction that they did back then, as sort of glorified adventurers?
I've seen it both ways.
No.
I mean, I've seen like Hammer Slammers. That was the Merc group, and
That
they
was
were
the 80s,
generally.
though.
Oh, was that the? Oh God,
Everybody
yeah,
wrote
it
it,
was.
yeah.
I'm so old. Okay, but I've seen it both ways in stories where the mercenaries are the despicable, turn on you because somebody offered better money types, and then the ones that actually believe in fulfilling the contract, like Wholesale Slaughter. Well, those guys were good guys. They were good guy mercenaries.
They were never really exactly mercenaries. They were undercover as mercenaries from an intelligence.
Trying to be mercenary. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but I still dig the whole idea. Though.
But my favorite characters from the BattleTech novels were the mercenary units, the Kellhounds,
the Kellhounds, Wolf's Dragoons,
Wolf Dragoons,
Cranston Snords Irregulars. Love those guys.
I think most of the stuff I've read that's more recent, the mercenaries kind of play around in more of a moral gray area. Like they might have good intentions, but they're doing bad things, or they might be, doing good things with maybe not the purest of intentions. Actually, one of the series you've written in, Shane, Fallen Empire, like I feel like a lot of those guys, pretty much all those PMCs, they operate in that gray area. They just live there. I mean, like the first book, you have like the big, the Irish Brigade, which are, I think you could agree, pretty much all those are pretty much morally upstanding people like Colonel Meager and Major Keeley and all them. But, at the end of the book, they just go murder a bunch of politicians. I mean, they had it coming, but it's still kind of a moral gray area. And then what was the name of the mercenary company in Galaxy's Edge season 2 that the rich dude was in charge of? Like they, it was like Black something.
Black Flag.
I don't know, but like they
Henry Rollins' band, dude.
Yeah, they were acting like they were trying to liberate the people of Kublar, but they were just looking for savage tech.
Yeah.
I think we talked about Hammer Slammers and David Drake. He's a product of Vietnam. And us kids here, we're all a product of the global war on terror, and so our experiences are similar in some ways and different in others. And
I was a product of the Cold War.
and me too. And I'm old, I guess. But we saw private military contractors in Iraq, Afghanistan. I flew on airplanes run by Blackwater. We operated with these guys. The experiences we've had a different experience with this. Our country didn't really use private military contractors in Vietnam, but we sure as shit used the hell out of them in the GWAT. So, and we saw it. So I think that's a different influence on how we look at that whole concept as we apply it to the art. You know what I mean? Or at least
one of my favorite quotes that I ever heard from the whole Great War on Terror came from a Blackwater contractor in Iraq. It was around the time frame of when they hung those contractors from the bridge in Fallujah. Yeah. So they were storming. There was like a militia storming the building where they were set up, and the contractors were setting up on a balcony to fire down at them. And the people in the building across the street were complaining about the gunfire. And the one guy said, tell them they can eat a cold bowl of F if they don't like it.
All right. On that happy note, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly chauffeur the man, and then we're going to jump right back in to We're talking about private military contractors in space.
In space!
Once, long ago, Jackson Rook was a war hero. Raised from boyhood to pilot a mech, he fought gallantly for the rebellion against the collectivists. Now he's a criminal, a smuggler with a new mission: steal a top-of-the-line mech and deliver it to a world so hostile, even the air will kill you. In the smuggling business, it's best to take the money and ask no questions. But when the client runs roughshod over the planet's citizens, Rook must look deep inside and see if the heart of a warrior still beats within. Gunrunner, by best-selling authors Larry Correia and John Brown. From Bain Books at bainbooks.com.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. So with that back, we were using our own experiences in the global war on terror and our thoughts on mercenaries. And I think you're onto something there, Shane, because some of the times the merc companies, the PMCs, were all ex-special forces that got out to cash in. And, you know, I get it. You've got a specialized set of skills. And much like with professional athletes, your body is only capable of that level of activity for so long. So why not, right? Earn out. But just as equally, I worked with some contractors where I suspect the people that were taking these contracts maybe elevated their experience above their abilities, shall we say politely, and then they ended up making things worse for us instead of better. So it was kind of a crapshoot.
So I just got done editing a book. It's nonfiction, and he's turned the manuscript in for DoD review right now, and we're hoping to get it published soon. But, you know, this guy, he did almost a decade in Afghanistan as a private military contractor. And he started in Iraq working for State Department with one of these companies pulling security at an embassy, and then did good job. So he's like, hey, why don't you go to Kabul and go work with the U.S. Embassy there, working the security contract for this British PMC. And that's how this guy ended up in Afghanistan. And then he spent nearly a decade there, but not like the embassy contract lasted like a year. And then he ends up getting fired. He has to find another job. So he's like getting these different jobs all over Afghanistan, doing these different things. And it's just a wild story. And this is like a real guy. But before he went to do all this, he was a retired Marine Corps officer, infantry officer. And 9/11 happened after he retired, and he's like, well, I'm still young enough to get in a fight, and I want to go do something. So he was over there living his best life. You know, his second marriage was falling apart, you know, and all that shit. But, you know, it's a great, great story. But yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of guys, contemporaries of ours, that were out there doing this stuff. I knew several of them. None of them were these special operators. None of these guys were tier 1 operators. These were all just Joes signing up. But what you said about these guys inflating their resumes a little bit, the person who wrote this book about his experiences there, he talked about that, where they would have these people just lie their asses off on the resumes, and they would show up in country. They wouldn't know how to load a fucking pistol, you know, and they're just like, get back on the plane and get out of here. Yeah, you're not only going to get yourself killed, but you're going to get one of us killed. So you're out. So just interesting stuff for sure.
So one thing to keep in track, because I just realized I actually got an uncle that was a PMC in Iraq, but he was there as a mechanic because he retired from the Army as a warrant officer, and they needed, you know, people to run the third shop to fix all the combat destroyed equipment. And so we tend to think of PMCs as definitely frontline units, but those contracts also supplied rear stuff too. So some of those private military contractors might have been running your DFAC, although you don't tend to think of them that way, or the dining facility, or they might have been, you know, repairing your Humvee when it hit the third IED.
Isn't Larry Correia one of his claims to fame being a private military contracting accountant? Wasn't that?
I think he was an accountant for the
DoD.
He was an accountant for the DoD, not PMC. I think.
Okay. Oh.
One of my best friends, my oldest friend who's still alive, worked for a PMC briefly after he stopped working for the DoD. He went to several different places because he couldn't get enough of the suck and wanted to go back.
I mean, I get it. Like, if I hadn't gotten out because I got hurt, I could see the allure of the action, the adrenaline. I mean, there's a reason people chase adrenaline highs with extreme sports and stuff.
Well, when I was leading a transition team in Afghanistan, like one of the guys that was assigned to us was like a contractor. He was in a PMC, right? So for a year, this guy, his name was Pat, and Pat was a retired U.S. Army lieutenant colonel. And Pat was a contractor, and he worked as an administrative assistant on our team. And Pat went everywhere with us. And he was a great guy. He was a great mentor to me. I was a major at the time, and he's a retired lieutenant colonel. I was always pulling Pat aside, like, "Hey, Pat, what do you think about this? And what can you tell me?" You know, Pat was a good dude. You know, he was a former Ranger qualified infantry guy, totally humble in his position. And, you know, I was the boss, but man, not a greater guy, but, you know, he got, like a lot of these other dudes, he got addicted to this stuff. And Pat did like 7 years straight in Afghanistan. He just kept signing contract after contract after contract. And I said, "Pat, why are you doing this stuff?" And he's like, "Well, I just, you know, bought this new house near Pensacola and I need to pay it off." But that wasn't it, man. They really got into that lifestyle and they kept it going for a long time, you know?
When the stakes are dire and the situations are more simple in the fact that combat can be, it can give you clarity that real life back home doesn't. I get it. Like if I hadn't gotten hurt, I might have done the same thing. I wasn't given that option, but I mean, I volunteered to go back for the second tour after the first, so I get it.
Yeah, so I weave that into a couple of my space mercenary stories. It's like the former soldier who just this shit is not out of their system yet, not even close, and they need that fix, and they need that lifestyle, and that's why they do it, you know. And they'll rationalize it any way they want. Like there's 100 reasons they can say, "Oh, I'm doing it for this noble reason," or "I'm doing it to pay these bills," or whatever. But that's not the real reason. The real reason is they want the fix. They want to be in the shit.
We do a lot of rationalizing in the military. Like this is the reason you tend to think of it as target acquisition and not "I'm shooting the bad guy," or you know, you give them nicknames to dehumanize them. When you're in that kind of line of work, you almost have to trick your brain into doing, you know, to thinking around the problem instead of facing it, I think. But let's apply that forward into space. So do you guys think there's a preference in a modern audience for the PMCs to be the good guys or the bad guys? Because like with dystopian, the megacorps are almost always the bad guys, right? Corporation bad, little guy good. When it comes to PMCs, mercenary units in science fiction, do you think there's a default trope?
I think if the government is the bad guy, then the mercenaries will probably be the good guy, and vice versa.
There's a big push for anti-heroes, and I think mercenaries make really great anti-heroes. Like Deadpool's a famous merc with a mouth, and I think that's really colored by the modern perceptions of things like Blackwater and things like that. Because back in history, the mercenaries could be argued as the original professional soldiers. There weren't a lot of standing armies, so you hired a mercenary captain with a whole crew. I'm talking 1400s. That's the guy you hired to build your army. And they were very reputable. They were very honorable. But then we have our experience, like you guys said, with the GWAT. And that colors things. And there's a lean in the business right now towards that kind of dark, grimdark, anti-hero, 40K style, and nobody's the good guy.
Well, you mentioned the good guy, bad guy motif. I know in the 80s, a lot of the action, the mercenary companies were the bad guys because they were protecting the drug lords, and the good guy had to take it down. So I think it does cycle a little bit. Do you foresee that stabilizing at any point in the future? And this is sort of group discussion. Or do you think we're going to ever get a default answer, or is it going to always vacillate?
Well, my opinion is that's what I love about fiction writing. Like, it just depends on whose perspective you're writing it from, right? And if you're writing it from the mercenaries' position, you can rationalize it and show that, hey, they've got these motivations and they're doing it for these reasons, and man, these are noble reasons. But if you told it from the perspective, well, they're just evil fuckers that are trying to get money for killing people. So
hey, look at sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, one of my favorite examples of how it could go both ways with the same characters are the Mandalorians from Star Wars. In the old lore, they were mercenaries. They were the super badasses of the Star Wars universe. And if you had Mandalorians on your side, you were probably going to win. And as time has gone on, they've kind of changed the lore a little bit here and there. They're still mercenaries, but they're also very tribal. And you got guys like Boba Fett who will work for the Hutts, but then you guys got like Din Djarin who tries to take on more noble contracts, and they have a kind of a higher way of doing things. And so they're both Mandalorians, but one of them's got a really stellar bad rap, and the other one's got a good rap. So I kind of dig the Mandalorians as far as an example of mercenaries that could be either good or bad depending on who they're working for.
I think it's always going to fluctuate. I mean, because in any story, like a soldier who's working for a government could be good or bad. Their government could be good or bad. And then a lot of times that soldier who joined like the Terran Union Army or the Federation or the whatever, like they joined for a lot of the same reasons that a mercenary became a mercenary. I mean, how many people join the military nowadays to get money for school or to, get VA benefits or, because they just didn't have anything else to do. If anything, I mean, a mercenary is just a soldier who's a little more honest about their reason.
That's the old joke was that when women of last resort, they found a pole, and men of last resort, they found a recruiter. There is some truth to that, I think. And the other thing is you run into when you talk about the armies and does that make them good or bad because they're fighting for their country? I've actually had some interesting online discussions about this. Is the average soldier in World War II, the Army grunt, had as much in common with the average German grunt, more in common with them than he did with the people back home, because everyone tends to other the enemy, and you don't realize how much you have in common with the guy you're fighting against. Sometimes more in common with them than the guys that are at home you're in theory protecting.
I think that depends on which army it is. Germany, maybe. Japan, no.
Fair.
Yeah.
In German, you got to break it down to what units and what branch for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I spent my last 3 years on active duty, as an attaché, and I spent a lot of time with the other attachés from all these different countries in the world, and we spent a lot of time hanging out, and it's that the profession of arms, no matter what country you're from. We all had a lot more in common with each other than people outside of the military. And it didn't matter what country it was from. And it was really, really unique. There was a bond and a commonality. It wasn't just between us service members. It was our spouses too, and the lifestyle that we all had together. And I had more in common with the attaché from Cambodia, Japan, or Sweden than I did with the people I'm neighbors with right now back in the civilian world.
So getting this back on kind of the science fiction angle. So we've talked about kind of what it is, why people might do it. Let's talk about it specifically in fiction. So what is it that draws it to you guys as creatives to write about it? Because, you've all either written about it or planning on it, which is why you volunteered for this panel. So what is it that makes that an interesting character for you guys to write?
Well, I mean, it's the freedom, because if you're in a military attached to a government, there's certain places you're going to be and certain stories you could tell. But if you're a mercenary, you're going to be involved with, the most wretched hive of scum and villainy, type places, and you get to tell more interesting stories that way.
So you're talking about Fort Benning. Got it.
When I was writing Galaxy's Most Wanted, part of that whole story arc across the 4 books was a Southside Chicago hood who eventually ends up in charge of a small armada of warship. And he gets involved in a conflict between 2 very ancient races. And I wanted to contrast that with another crew of humans. And these are like some of the only humans that are in space in this little universe that have their own ship. And they were basically ragtag mercenaries, very similar to the Firefly crew. They'll pretty much take on any job and do whatever. And they were the Royal Flush. That was the name of their ship, was the Royal Flush, because that's how they won it. And so I had these two characters, my main character, and then the leader of the Royal Flush Gang. He was trying to recruit him into this war, and he wouldn't go because he was running jobs for an intelligence operation. And of course, my main character just assumes that he's just not offering him enough money, and there is some conflict there between those two guys. And I like that kind of a contrast. I didn't. I really wanted to do a spin-off series with those guys, and I still may at some point because they're just a bunch of fun characters. But I like the idea of working for somebody, and then that contract ends, and then you work for somebody else, and it's
very episodic, which gives you a lot of options from a plot point. So you set up a sort of a ragtag unit, but you can see that kind of storytelling with actual military units. I mean, heck, we had, was it the 83rd Division, World War II? They literally called them the Ragtag Circus. Famous for commandeering anything with wheels on the way to Germany.
Just watch any episode of The Fat Electrician. You'll get a lot of that.
Yeah, you've got the was it Black Sheep was the ragtag air unit in the Marines in World War II. I mean, like, there are.
You got to read Pappy Boyington's autobiography. It's awesome.
It's a fantastic read. Yeah,
you really read his legend and you realize he was like less than a year in that unit. It's crazy. But anyway, so like, do you think that that's a precursor to tell the mercenary story? Is the ragtag kind of rags to riches story, or can it be just as professional as, you know?
Well, there's the legend of the wartime hero, peacetime screw up, right? Like Murphy's laws of combat. Combat ready units don't pass inspection. Inspection ready units don't pass combat.
That checks.
You know, so like that's part of the attraction with the Charlie Hawk stories that I'm writing, working on. These guys are the wartime hero, peacetime screw up maintenance platoon that ends up stranded behind enemy lines and uses their knowledge of how to fix stuff to do the opposite. And they become amazing saboteurs. So you still got that ragtag.
We touched on Pappy Boyington. You know, his first combat experience was with a mercenary unit called the Flying Tigers.
Right.
Were they mercenaries or just?
Oh, hell yeah, they were, because they were hired by the Chinese government for cash gold bounties for shooting down Japanese Zeros or Japanese aircraft. I mean, these guys were the OG mercenaries of World War II. I mean, there's mercenaries going back centuries, obviously. But.
Sure, yeah. So there was the pilots that flew for the French in World War I, the American pilots.
Those were the Flying Escadrilles, but those were actually part of the standing French army, so they wouldn't be considered. There was a foreign.
Were they? I thought they were just hired.
No, they were part of. That's why when they came back, their rank and stuff transferred with them. Because they were part of the standing French army. I thought that's what China had done too, but it sounds like Shane is saying no, they were just flat out paid for hits.
Well, they got bonuses for hits. But yeah, I mean, Chinese government, well, they were donated, like, I believe I'm having this right. They were donated Lend-Lease. Let's call it Lend-Lease. 100 P-40 Tomahawks. And then they took all these pilots, from all branches of the service, Army, Navy, that was where we had our pilots back then. And the Flying Tigers was basically a mercenary outfit, which was fantastic. It was beautiful.
So which of those, because we keep hitting back to mercenary units and fighting in the past, do you think any of those tropes, those kind of stories translate better than others to sci-fi?
I had a mercenary space fighter wing in a book that I helped ghostwrite back in the day. That they all had their call signs and they own their own starfighters, and
you already said too much, Michael.
Yeah. I didn't use any names. You're not going to figure out who it was. But
right.
I think it translates pretty well.
For specific tropes that translate well, the Highlanders were famous at one point for being mercenaries.
So they started killing each other because you don't be only one.
Yeah. The actual Highlanders were very famous at one point as mercenaries, and I went with kind of that route for my mercenary. He's not just some ragtag dude. He comes from a long lineage of fighters from a particular place. It's near the polar caps of Mars that has this very famous tradition of breeding mercenary warriors. And he goes out on a job, and the job is too despicable even for him. Which is another reason that makes mercenaries so fun, is that mercenaries get to draw their own lines. When you're in the service, you either follow orders or you get shot. You either follow orders and you get thrown in the brig. Like there's no line there to draw. You have to do what your government says to do or suffer very severe consequences. The mercenaries, they're already taking their own lives at risk just for profit. So if the cost of bullshit ratio doesn't come out, then you just cut it. And so he literally runs away with a backpack nuke because he's not going to backpack nuke the city they want him to backpack nuke, because that's just too much. And
I think one of the reasons that PMCs in space work so well is just because space is so big. If you think it's when if humanity ever really gets outside of this solar system and starts pushing across the Milky Way, I mean, like, there's no way that governments by themselves are going to explore everything. Like, there's going to be a lot of, Elon Musk, the 27th or something, that's funding these expeditions out to discover all these new planets, because there's going to be a lot of money in it. Like, whether you find new stuff we've never heard of before, stuff we've been after forever, like gold and silver or plutonium or whatever. So, I mean, there's probably going to be a huge niche for mercenaries to fill. And that's just a really interesting thing to explore in science fiction, I think.
And if you fill those at a certain point in time, I could see those mercenary units coalescing into their own sort of little pirate kingdoms, and then by default creating political systems around that. And there's historical precedent for that too. I was joking in the side chat, which you can't see, dear listener, but I mean, like, Prussia was a historic nation that made their profit on sending their excess young men to fight mercenary units. You could see that, they get that kind of situation working in sci-fi, where they suddenly start colonizing areas, and it's ours now, and becoming their own nation too, which is Shane's talking about in the chat, is the letter of marque or letter of marquee for piracy as well. But when you're a pirate for hire with a letter of marque, I would argue you probably qualify as mercenary as well, as opposed to just straight piracy.
And it's codified in our Constitution, baby.
I wonder how I could get a letter so I could put a cannon on my boat, and make it a ship. You think we could still do that? I could petition my government. They'll do it.
You got to use the whole title, because it sounds so much more badass. Letters of marque and reprisal.
There you go.
Indeed.
I'm going to write my congressman and see what that'll get me. I wonder if I could go to war with the Houthis or something. I don't know.
I bet you could get that to fly in Florida.
All you need is a kayak and a 22, JR.
There you go. You could just dress your kayak up to look like a battleship. There we go. All right. So do you think that since we've talked about the flying escadrilles and the flying tigers and all that, do we see a lot of sci-fi mercenary units that are actual aviation type squadrons, so space fighters, or is it mostly ground troops and navies?
I mostly see ground troops.
That's mostly what I've seen as well, but I think it could be cool. I don't know, Red Squadron in,
Well, yeah, I mean, you had. I'm going back to BattleTech again, but most of the Merc units in BattleTech had their own jump ships, their own drop ships, their own aerospace fighters.
They did not have their own. They did not have their own jump ships. Remember, before.
Oh, that's right. They had to hire those out. Yeah. Yep. But they did have aerospace fighters, and some of them even had their own armored units, which just amazes me that tanks were even still a thing that far in the future. I just don't see that happening, but that's just me. But so yeah, they did have aerospace elements and squadrons that went right along with the battle mechs.
Yeah, I think most of your written your PMCs in space right now is a lot of ground troops, but and I think there's a lot to explore beyond that. The one I'm writing right now, I'm writing it from a former naval officer's perspective, and we're looking at that for as an option. I love ground troops because I'm a former infantry guy. I love that stuff, but again, there's more there's more going on out there. There's a lot more to explore in that genre. So I think it's limitless. I think there's a lot of stuff you could do in that. A lot of ground.
If you get naval mercenaries, you're getting pretty close to pirates, like we were talking about before.
That's how I'm writing it.
Yeah.
That's where I'm going with it.
Where's that line though? Like when do you stop being a mercenary and start being a pirate? I mean, is it just like when is anyone who has a ship with guns on it who attacks other ships a pirate and a mercenary, or are they just a pirate? Or are we?
Well, somebody's paying them to do it. They're a mercenary. If they're doing it just to get the money themselves, they're a pirate.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
that's it.
To what I said before, it depends on your perspective, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the fun of writing fiction. I mean, you get to pick whose side you're on, and I think that makes it fun. It makes it fun for me.
In Wholesale Slaughter, the ship that they hire to carry their supposed mercenary company in the first place is kind of a quasi pirate / mercenary.
Yeah, and then you've got
one of my
stories
favorite
like Cutter's War.
One of my favorite characters, Captain Donner Osceola.
So go ahead.
I would argue that at some point in our history there will be another golden age of piracy, and it will be space piracy. And the reason I say that is the original golden age of piracy comes out of naval wars in Europe. All those sailors that had fought in those wars, England and France have been fighting for God knows how long, for several hundred years, and developing these highly advanced navies. And then those wars end, and they don't have a good home. And just like we talked about with the Great War on Terror, all my buddies that became contractors, they didn't have anywhere else to go with their skills, just like we talked about. Now, whether they were addicted to the combat or whatever, that might be the case, but the pirates come from soldiering. The pirates start as soldiers, become mercenaries. Maybe they get a letter of marque, maybe they don't, but then they eventually become pirates. When we adapt to space well enough, someone's going to get in a fight, that fight's going to end, and then we're going to have space pirates all over again. And it's going to be another mercenary age and another pirate age.
You ever hear the propose that we're going to get there before we go into outer space, right? The U.S. Navy, for example, has been, the most powerful Navy on planet Earth for the last 80 years. But maybe not anymore. The Chinese Navy's bigger now and only growing faster, and our industrial base can't keep up with it. At what point does the U.S. Navy say, we have to do an economy of force over here, and we might need some help, and we might need to hire private companies, Somali pirates, for example.
I've heard the Chinese Navy doesn't have a lot of range, though.
I don't want to get into too many details, but let's just.
I've also heard that they have a bigger Navy because they have rowboats that count as warships. So
I've heard they only have like a handful of ships that can go more than about 500 miles.
So, but to your point, though, and with what Jesse said, the golden age of piracy was, at the end of an era of massive war, the war ends, and those soldiers, those sailors, combat's their only viable skill. And look what happens. I mean, we even see that after World War II. That's where a lot of the motorcycle gangs started. You got these guys coming back from combat, and they're sort of addicted to the rush, and they apply it to motorcycle joyriding with their clubs, and sometimes crimes happen. And so, like, the idea that when the war ends, if that's your only skill set and you don't know how to come home, that happens over and over again every time there's a major conflict. So I don't foresee how that wouldn't eventually happen to the space race as well. The question is, does that look like only ground forces? When Elon Musk starts his colony on Mars, is it going to be, Martians versus Earthlings, or like, what's that going to look like in the future?
It's like an economy of scale. If all you have the money for is ground troops, and that's it. But if you have the money and the resources for navies and space navies, in our example, then yeah, maybe.
It depends on what you need done. Like in Cutter's Wars, Steve Perry wrote a three-book series called Cutter's Wars, where you had a small private military group that specialized in like small unit actions, like high value target extraction or protection, stuff like that. I think there was like a total of 10 people, in the unit, and they were kind of a combination espionage / soldier group. And the premise of that whole series was that as humanity expanded into the stars, the governments couldn't afford to have standing armies and navies to cover everything. So they would hire private military corporations to handle some of the garrison duty and certain special operations.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a big part of it is cost, and not only that, but if we eventually get into genetic and cybernetic advancement, and this is a big theme in my Children of Fire stuff, in my actual mill sci-fi, when you start paying billions of dollars or millions of dollars, or just investing all these resources into these guys, where they have specialized equipment, specialized genetic modification, and they decide they want to get out, well, the only way to not be an evil bastard is to not rip that stuff out of them. So now we're going to talk about a whole nother level of my body is still capable of this, and this is my skill set. So what do you do with those guys? You pay them. That's all you can do from a moral perspective. I mean, unless you want to really be the bad guy and literally tear pieces out of these guys. So it brings an interesting conundrum that is really answered by a mercenary setup.
That's an interesting conundrum, is what that looks like when the question of what it even means to be human is something we have to consider as a viable discussion point.
It's a different episode, isn't it?
Also,
Yeah,
if the government invests that much money into like genetic or cybernetic enhancement of a soldier, would they be willing to let them leave the military in the first place?
I mean, look what they did to poor RoboCop. He just wanted to retire in death, and nope, they wouldn't let him.
Stop loss 2450.
Yep. All right. So we kind of went a little bit of the history of actual mercenaryisms and then what that might look like in space. It sounds like there's a lot more niche discussion points we could all have as we drill this topic down. And at some point, I suspect we'll do future episodes. But before we wrap this up, because we are at the hour mark, is there anything you think we should cover about the concept largely and more broadly of mercenaries and space sci-fi that we need to cover?
People need to read more of it so we can write more of it.
Yes.
Well, he said.
So I can put my daughter through law school.
So she can write your own letter of marque. There you go. And reprisal. Wait, if we become mercenaries, will she represent us at a discount since we know you?
I think she will, yes.
There we go.
Awesome.
All right. Anyone else have closing thoughts before we wrap this puppy up?
I don't know. My whole thing about it is I think you'll see, like you see now, you have specialized units. There's ground troops. There's, I don't know that I haven't seen very many. You guys may correct me on this, but I don't know of any mercenary warships right now that are out there. There may be. I don't know. I'm not a water type sports guy.
Well,
But,
there are private vessels that have weapons to deal with pirates. I don't know if you can call those mercenaries, but
are those just armed merchant ships though, or
sort of? I mean, the guys manning the weapons can be called mercenaries.
Okay.
In the Strange Company books, that whole mercenary company has their own warship, and they actively use it in combat.
I got to catch up on those. I've only read the first one.
I think the third one's about to come out.
Yeah, the third one's about to come out, and the concept cover art for that is just glorious. I'm just mad I didn't think of it myself.
I just think as we expand for space operations, I think you're going to see more specialization. Like I could easily see hiring your own small Navy group of warships or what have you for picket duty, or keeping the bad guys away from your planet, or to run defense platforms in orbit, stuff like that, because it's cheaper than building one yourself and manning your own Navy, especially if you're a young colony. You don't have the personnel.
In most of my books, the mercenary ships they're more like what they used to call lighters back in the day. They're merchant or cargo vessels with weapons on them, not warships built from the ground up to be warships, because those are probably going to be more tightly controlled and very expensive to build. So
So I guess the closing thought is avoid the 3-hour tours, and there's a lot of room. And the concept of like the ghost fleet, which is what we call the fleet in the James River, which is all retired warships that are not out of service in theory. They're mothballed and could be brought back. I could see that, at some point in time, there's a floating ship graveyard in space that, people are recalling those for mercenary units. I definitely think, Battlestar Galactica, it was a museum for crying out loud. And so I think there's room for those kind of mercenary stories, and you should start reading them and writing them, dear listeners, so we have more, because we need to build that market up just a little bit. And with that, to help those books sell, I'm going to remind you, dear listener, to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right book. So do your part, because I want to read more Space Mercenaries and see if the Prussians really do have cool uniforms in space. All right. With that, we're going to wrap it up. And Rick, what are you writing at the moment? And then how can listeners and viewers at home find you?
Well, I just finished the 10th book in the Taken to the Stars series with Jay and Shaney, and I am working now on a new series for Athon. It's going to be called Archangel.
Nice.
And you can find me on Amazon.com under Rick Partlow. I'm the only one who writes science fiction. So,
is there any truth to the rumor that every 15th book, Jay and Shaney let you outside to see the sun?
No, he does not. Never let me outside to see the sun.
Man, there goes his humanitarian award. Jeez. All right, Jesse, what are you writing, and then how can they find you?
I am still working on the Holy Diver in the Midnight Sea, which is heavily mercenary driven and may or may not end up in space. I'm also working on a space trucker short that features the mercenary I mentioned earlier. Good old Kairos is going to make his debut. And that's really the big projects right now. And I'm trying to stop doing so many short stories and actually work on a novel.
You and me both. But speaking of short stories, by about the time this episode airs, and we don't know exactly the date when we're recording this at the first week of December, but Jesse and I will be in a short story collection about dragons. And I can't even remember the name of it at this point, but it will be coming out around this, and we will tell you all about it here soon.
Deadly Fire.
There we go. You read your contract better than I did, apparently. So that's also a lesson. Read the contract. You just don't scribble your name on it. I might have just sold my firstborn. I don't know. I didn't read it. Jeez. Shane, what are you writing at the moment, and then how can we find you?
So right now I'm writing a book called Death Dealers, Guns for Hire. Weird enough, private military contractors in space. And
in space.
I'm having a heck of a lot of fun with it. I'm also re-editing my other private military contractor book in space called Battle Drills for a re-release here soon. You can find me on Facebook. If you're on there, I have a group called Shane's Rally Point. A lot of tomfoolery going on in there. Come check us out.
All right. And when you get that new series out, you'll have to come back and we'll talk about an episode of Nothing But. Could be fun. I'm interested.
Heck yeah. All
right. JR, the other JR, what are you writing, and then where can we find you online?
I'm writing the sequel to my book, Terra Ascending, and I'm also writing a book about private military contractors in space for Canon Publishing. Basically, it centers on two characters that are based on me and my old platoon sergeant, and it's basically about how I was the worst and best squad leader he ever had simultaneously on some like crappy jungle planet, and there's going to be some like Predator vibes to it going on. It hopefully won't be a big steaming pile of crap. You can find me on Amazon. J.R. Wise. There is another J.R. Wise who's a woman who wrote something about horses. That's not me. I'm the other one. And also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, or whatever it's called now. I use the handle The Wise Author.
Look, if you want to wear a dress to write your other stuff, we will not judge you. I just want you to know that. I mean, you were with the Navy a lot. We just expect that weird stuff.
See, basically, we have J.R. Wise and then J.R. Otherwise.
All right. So, if you only gave your platoon sergeant gray hairs and you didn't make his hair fall out, I'd still say it's winning.
Yeah, he said I was great in the field and absolute trash in garrison. which I took as a compliment.
Fair enough.
Wartime hero, peacetime screw up.
Yep.
Yeah, the kind of guys I wanted in a foxhole with me were probably not the kind of guys that were going to keep me out of trouble in the barracks. We'll leave it there. That's a whole nother trope that might get its own episode at some point. So, all right,
I thought he just described a Marine like that. I just thought that's what Marines did. Was
no, there's plenty of prissy little inspection ready Marines with sticks up their asses who can't shoot a rifle.
Oh Lord!
And this every Marine a marksman is horse crap. I would be dead if every Marine was a marksman because we got
the thing that really pisses me off is every Marine a rifleman. That is bullshit. That is its own MOS 0311. Rifleman or rifleman, and everyone else isn't.
Yeah, we the Marines at outside of Summerall opened up on us, and if one shot, one kill was true, I would not be hosting this Wait, maybe I'm not hosting this podcast, and this is all a fever dream.
Ooh.
All right, so I'm glad we can agree. The Brotherhood of the Grunt. See, it doesn't matter what service, what branch, what uniform. It's all the same.
Yeah.
So, all right, Michael. One more time before you tell us what you're writing and how we can find you. Do the in space for us. One more time.
Oh, in space.
There we go.
Yeah,
I'm gonna make that my ringtone.
I'm working on with Peter Stanley book series we're loosely titled Starcom. Yeah, Peter Stanley. Space Coasties, so Coast Guard in space, who get caught up in a shooting war between humanity and our first contact with aliens. Also working on. I keep calling it the Charlie Hawk series. It's really not the name. That's the name of the unit. The name I've come up for the series is the Gearhead Gorillas because it's a bunch of maintenance guys who become saboteurs.
So grease monkeys.
And yeah, basically grease monkeys with an attitude. And so I'm working on plotting those out, and I'll probably start writing those in addition to the Starcom books because we need sleep. It's overrated.
When I was briefly cosplaying
catch up to Rick.
Yeah, me too. When I was briefly cosplaying as a soldier outside of the infantry, when I was a watercraft operator, we worked with a lot of the engineers, the watercraft engineers. Their motto was, "We don't make mistakes. Where'd you park yours?" Because they would make fun of the drivers. I could see that vibe going on from what you're describing.
Oh yeah, it's all of these characters in the Charlie Hawk stuff are based on people I served with in the maintenance platoon of an air defense artillery unit in Germany. And
I dig it.
I'm not even changing some of their names. They're gonna just. There really is a Sergeant First Class Terry Waldrop that we called the Drip God Almighty, who. And
that's just because he liked the ladies and they weren't always virtuous.
Well, he was this massive dude. I mean, everything from the waist up was just solid. Man, lived in the gym. Never ever worked his legs. He looked like a rock on toothpicks. And it's just the craziest thing. But man, did he have attitude. It was great. So yeah, they're going to be a lot of fun.
And where can we find you on the Wild interwebs?
You can find me at michaellavoice.com, or you can find me on Linktree that has links to all of my stuff, my Substacks and Facebooks and Twitters and X's and all that fun stuff.
And he can bloviate with the best of them, dear listener. So you should check it out. You can.
What do you mean by that? Bloviate.
Just don't go to just LaVoice.com because that'll take you to the French version of the game show.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Whoa, my man.
You can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree at linktr.ee Linktree/Blasters and Blades podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChutes, the Rumbles, the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Twitters, the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have our website over there on Spotify. Click it in the links. We have our email, Blasters and Blades podcast at gmail.com for professional purposes only. Save the shenanigans from Madam Stabby Stab on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. And 2025 is going to be the year someone actually is brave enough to send her some hate mail. We want to see what happens. And if she gets stabby, Nick's there to take the heat for us, so we're good.
I'm going to create a fake email account just to send her crap.
You can name it like Rick Partlow or something.
Do we know where to find Jesse yet?
Jesse told us, right?
Okay. I'll make sure.
No, outlawauthor.com. So that's where all my central stuff is. You'll find a link to Substack, X, and Instagram and all that.
Thank you, Rick. You get honorary co-host today because you caught that. I've had him on so many episodes. I just know his website by now. Good catch, Rick. You get kudos today. You can have double rations at the PX or something. I don't know. All right, and then
I don't need double rations at my age.
Or if you, aside from the link tree, if you want to go to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section that is for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-host duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it floats out of their ears and their eyes turn brown. And with that, if you go to the link in the comments or in the show notes or the comment section, use that link, code podcast grunts. You get 10% off. We get a little bit of a kickback. It's a win-win, people. And these episodes aren't free to produce. And in 2025, unfortunately, the price is going up. I have to find a replacement for StreamYards because they quadrupled their price on me. So if you want to throw some shekels our way, we would greatly appreciate it. And with that, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thanks for coming on, everybody. We appreciate it. You're going to have to come back on when we get the next PMCA in space subtopic. And you, dear listener, if you've got ideas to narrow this focus a little bit, we're here for it. Tell us in the comments, and we'll host another episode. Because we got
Call me back for the PMCS in space episode.
I'll do that. You're totally on it. All right, with that, I'm going to hit the end button. Wait for it. Don't cuss yet. Don't